Hello YouTube, this is Pullin, and to follow up my previous video, I'm going to present my 5th round game from USAT last weekend. So this was my game against International Master Erik Santarius, 24-34, who I believe is the current state champion of Wisconsin. And I was on, board 1 for the Chicago Chess Center team and playing black in this game. I don't know, flip the board. That might be smart. And I've done only very light annotation on this game. So I'll actually have Houdini running, in the background, in case I want to stop and go into branches. But I'm hoping this will allow me to just go more or less straight through the game and show you what happened. This is a Sicilian, and we go into the open, and it becomes a Sicilian Najdorf. And for those of you who may have watched my live blitz videos, you would know that my preparation in the Najdorf is very scant. I haven't been playing the Najdorf for like years and years, like some other club players have. So fortunately, my opponent in this game did not play one of the main lines, which would be bishop e3, bishop g5, bishop c4. He played a sideline, and those of who follow the Klaus Jensen chess channel are quite familiar with this move, 6h3. The idea of 6h3 is that white is going to try to advance the pawn g4, pawn g5 to force black to react to this g5 thrust sooner than he would ordinarily do so. And this knight on d4 can often then pull back to g3 behind the pawn. Bishop g2 is an option for white. And once the pawn gets to g5, white can also follow up with pawn f4, pawn f5, or advance the h-pawn, etc. He basically allows him to play a pawn storm. And the line which I chose, I was actually prepared for this variation. And the line which I chose is not recommended by a lot of books, but I think it's quite viable and maybe even the critical line against the h3 variation. So I play e5, which forces knight de2. And in this position, I played bishop e6. I think h5 is also a move. That does make a lot of sense because it cuts down on the the g4 pawn move. But h5 might turn out to be a significant weakness. So white can just continue and play the fianchetto variation where black is committed to this h-pawn move, or he can put the bishop on g5 since there's no h6 anymore. So there are probably ways for white to deal with this h5 idea, but the move I played is bishop e6. And the motivation behind this move is that black simply wants to take over the center before white is able to get his bishop to g2 and lock down the d5 square. So my opponent played g4, and I played d5. So it is a slight loss of time because this d-pawn moved twice. But tactically, I think it holds up. So it's g5 is no good, because the knight could just take on e4. So white exchanges in the center and knight takes. And now white will have to show that his g4 pawn advance is relevant in this open center position. I mean, black has a nice pawn on e5. So bishop g2, threatening the piece on d5. Now it's 3 attackers. So bishop b4 pins one of the attackers. White castles. Black swaps bishop for knight, and then knight takes back, knight takes, and my opponent captured my queen, king takes, pawn takes, and king c7. So what transformation has occurred here? Well, we have 4 pawns against 3 pawns on the king side. We have 3 pawns against 2 on the queen side, but these pawns are crippled, and the c pawns are on the half-open c file, which might potentially become important. White has a bishop pair, which is definitely an important factor in the position, and his development. Black's pieces are not so active right now. I mean, black has his king on c7, which is helping him defend the squares on the queen side. But even though white has a bishop pair, I think because of the structural damage, black is quite okay here. Like, my opponent played f4 here, and if a bishop ever gets to f4, to this diagonal pointing at black's king, then black is not going to survive the opening. This king position on c7 is sort of holding everything together, and is quite precarious. So black has to play f6 here, even though that seems counterintuitive because it results in an isolated king pawn. My opponent took on e5, and I took back. And then rook e1, knight c6. So here, black has an isolated king pawn. White has a crippled 3-on-2 on the queen side, and it's 2-on-2 on the king side. Now white, if he wanted to, could take on c6, and then king takes and takes this pawn. So now white is actually up a pawn. However, we have opposite colored bishops, and also white's structure is rotten. So after, rook a e8, white's winning chances here are extremely minimal. So white decided, rightly so, to hang on to his bishop pair. But even reaching this position, I have a knight on c6, which is holding on to my e5 pawn. If white ever wants to regain this pawn on e5, whether he attacks it with his dark square bishop or whether he chops on c6, it'll involve a trade of a bishop for a knight. So then white will no longer have his bishop pair. So this I think is a good thing about black's position. The bishop pair advantage is mitigated by the fact that in order to take back this pawn on e5, white has to give up the bishop pair. And what other obvious targets are in the black position? So my opponent played a3 in this position, which is really this move is really lame. But his motivation is he wants to get the rook on the half-open b file without dropping the a2 pawn. However, a3, perhaps the bishop might want to go to a3 at some point. I don't know. It's hard for me to suggest anything here. I mean, Houdini thinks bishop e3 is best, and that seems logical, because these squares are kind of weak. So this would be a good way of developing for white. I mean, it says white's advantage is down to like 0.14, which is almost nothing in computer speak. Suggests moves like rook d8, rook e8, h5. So black is absolutely fine here. Back to the game, my opponent played a3 in order to get the rook on b1. So I developed my rook, and then rook b1, and bishop a2. I want to play the bishop to d5. This is an important maneuver in this line in general. Black wants to get his rook to d8 and then swing this bishop to d5 to try to exchange for white's fianchetto bishop, because this bishop is potentially quite strong on the long diagonal here. So black wants to take over that long diagonal. However, before playing bishop d5, I put the bishop on a2 in order to make this rook go to a stupid square, and then I intend to return to d5. So squares this rook could go to. Not here, not here, not here, not here, not here. So he's got to either go back to A1 where he came from, or he's got to go to B2, which, you know, blocks in is, this rook is blocked in on B2. Its only function is to attack the B7 pawn. So then I come to D5, preparing to trade off bishops. He then develops his bishop, and now comes a critical moment in the game. White's last move was bishop E3. And you should always, if you want to, get close to the truth in the position, you should always start by looking at your opponent's last move. What squares does he give up? What squares does he gain? What is his threat? And clearly he's threatening to check and win an exchange. So what do you think I did about this threat here? What would you do if you were black in this position? Well, it is certainly possible to block off that square by playing b5, but I don't know. White can then play a4 and start some tension here, and black's queenside is actually quite loose now. This rook may be coming over to b1, and there could be a lot of play here as a result of this b5 move. What I did, I actually ignored the bishop b6 threat, and I took on g2. Houdini approves. This is actually the first time I've analyzed this game with the computer. Houdini approves of this move and thinks that black has a slight advantage now. In the game, my opponent thought for quite a while about this move, and then he decided simply to recapture on g2, which is hard to blame him for. Let's see what would have happened if he had gone through with the bishop b6 skewer. King c8, bishop takes d8, bishop takes h3. Now, this bishop on d8 is threatened, so he has to move, presumably, to bishop h4, and then just takes on g4. So, let's take stock of the position here. Black has sacrificed an exchange, rook for bishop. As a result, White no longer has a bishop pair. He's lost his light-squared bishop on g2. Black has two pawns for the exchange, and they're connected pass pawns on the king side. So White's king side has been completely stolen. There's still this isolated pawn on e5, but the pawn is well defended by the knight. There's no way for White to attack this knight with a pawn. There's no way to attack it with the bishop because his bishop is on the wrong color. So unless White wants to sacrifice an exchange for this knight on c6, this knight is a permanent fixture, and it protects a lot of important squares. It's protecting this pawn. It's protecting the back rank. It's protecting this entry on the 7th rank. It's protecting b8. Again, possibly could swing over to c4, which is also a weak square. So this knight on c6 has a lot of value in this position. And, because of these, nearly useless double pawns, it's like black is up 3 pawns here. So this, that's why I was willing to go into this exchange sacrifice, because black's pieces are much better than white's. So instead, when I took on g2, he played king takes, which is a small victory for me because I was able to efficiently trade off the light square bishops and eliminate white's bishop pair. So here I have to deal with the threat of the skewer now. And I didn't want to play rook d7 because then he could play rook f1, and now it's difficult for me to contest the f file. So I wanted to keep my rooks connected. That's why I played king c8. Now here my opponent played rook bb1. Again, this gets his rooks connected and confesses that b2 is not the best square for the queen rook. So here I played rook hf8. Again, getting the rook to one of the open files that's adjacent to my isolated pawn, and also cutting off his king. Now in the previous position, with his rook still on this square, white could have brought his king into the position with king f3. And this was a move that I was wondering about for white, and my opponent was also contemplating this move, as we discussed after the game. Let's see, king c8. Like here, in this position, instead of playing king c8, one of the moves I was contemplating here was actually the somewhat counterintuitive rook df8. Getting out of the skewer and also cutting off the white king from coming to the center of the position. But I think this is just too slow, because white's rooks don't belong here, and is giving up the d file. Also, this bishop could come to c5 and could be quite annoying. In fact, actually, Houdini now that I have running it suggests a significant white advantage after rook eb1, because the only good way to guard this this pawn on b7 is now to come back to d8, and all black's pieces are screwed up here. So I'm glad I did not play. This. I rejected rook df8 for the wrong reasons, but I was right to do so. I felt that the d file would be important, too important for black to just give away. But actually, it's the b file that comes into play if I shift both of my rooks over to the king side. Alright, so I guess I spoke a little too long about that position. Anyway, here, king f3 was a possibility, with the idea of bringing the... It's difficult to shake the white king once it gets to e4, blockading the pawn. So my opponent actually suggested this pawn sack, e4 check. And the idea is that if this pawn is taken, then the black rooks get quite active on the E and F files, and it's in a position where this rook is very poorly coordinated with the rest of white's pieces. In fact, Houdini really likes this position after a move neither of us considered here, rook hf8. Simply, cutting the white king off from its retreat and keeping the white king in the center. This looks quite scary for... it looks quite scary for white. And the correct move here is rook bb1 with a counterattack on b7. If this... Oh. No, Houdini is changing its mind, and it's saying that rook de8 is just winning here. Yeah, so this move would have been good. I must admit I did not see this sacrifice during the game. So it does move a pawn onto a more vulnerable square. But again, even if I lose this isolated king pawn, is still a good position, because of the crippled queenside pawns. So here, rook bb1 was played, again restoring the connected rooks, and then rook hf8, cutting the king off, and then rook e2. Again, kind of an awkward-looking move, but in this position, it serves a useful function. It stops rook d2 check. One of the moves that black would like to consider is swinging the knight, onto a5 and c4, because this c4 square looks like a very juicy square for black's knight. Slightly better than the square it's on now, c6. However, the problem with knight a5 is that it allows this this bishop b6, forking the knight on a5 and the rook on d8. However, the problem with bishop d6 is that black is able to play this rook d2 check and then save the knight by bringing it into c4. After rook e2 takes this check away. so that knight a5 is no longer viable because of bishop b6, and black will not be able to check on d2. So rook d5 was played instead. Again, this takes away the c5 square, and it removes the rook from attack, so it makes this maneuver, knight a5, knight c4, possible. My opponent played c4, and black has a choice here. He can just retreat the rook with the knowledge that this pawn move to c4 has weakened the white position, especially the d4 square. Or black could go on an adventure with rook a5. I decided I didn't want to possibly disconnect my rooks and get this rook misplaced on a5. So I played back to d7. Actually, Houdini likes this move slightly more. Again, this rook has to go here to guard this, and then this and this. So this rook is very awkwardly placed on c3. But I guess the issue is after knight d4. I mean, this is a very strong square for the knight. White doesn't really want to take this, because then after e takes d4, the d pawn will attack this rook, which will have to move, and then black will snarf this pawn. So I guess that's also quite strong for black. It's amazing how poorly coordinated the white rooks are in this endgame. So c4, and then I just dropped the rook back to d7, and now my opponent brings his rook into the position with rook b3. So the move I played, I looked at my opponent's last move, rook b3, and he's putting his rooks into knight fork range. So when I play knight d4, he has to take, and then he'll no longer have the bishop against knight, so it creates a major transformation in the position, which I would have to evaluate then. I guess there really is nothing. My opponent couldn't find anything better than rook b3, so it's kind of a testament to how awkward the white position is. Actually, knight d4 is not. It's not even in Houdini's top 3. Like, it thinks black should just slowly improve his position. Like, it rates h6 and g6 above knight d4 in this position, simply because white can't do anything constructive. So yeah, that is quite something. Anyway, I decided that I liked black's chances in the transformed position, so I played knight d4, which again forces bishop takes. And then my opponent thought that I was going to take with rook and get active on the 5th rank. In fact, this pawn would immediately become a problem, although I would lose my e-pawn. But actually, I decided to take with pawn instead. So my idea here is that, well, I have several plans. I can bring the rooks double behind the pawn and then threaten to push to liquidate. I could also bring this rook to c7, which puts pressure on the c-pawn. And if he commits both of his rooks to blockade this pawn, like on d3 and d2, then in that case I can advance my king to attack this weak pawn on c4. So I have a variety of healthy-looking plans in this double rook endgame, which is why I went for the e takes d4. My opponent blockaded, and I doubled, and he came e4, which is a more active square than going behind the pawn. And in fact, later on, he's able to move this rook again to cut off my king from entering the position. So rook e4 was a good move on his part. I developed my king, he developed his king, and I played king b6. King c6 was also a move, but King b6 is slightly better because it keeps the c file open. So after king b6, he played rook e5 to cut off my king from coming in, because otherwise I would just come and attack his c pawn. And now I brought my rook to c8. I want to keep the rook on d7. This is a defensive rook. It keeps my 7th rank safe. This rook is the attacking rook, trying to snipe on c4. So my opponent played rook b3 check, and I sunk the king back to a7. And here he played c5 because they're trying to save the c pawn. And I doubled rooks on it, and there's no way to defend this pawn, so he played c3. Trying to trick me. He wants to make his c pawn healthier. And if I take on c3, then he'll play rook takes, and he'll be defending this the c pawn with both rooks, and it won't be so weak because I won't be able to win it, and his king will then just be able to enter the position. So the correct move here is to push past d3, just to make sure that this pawn capture is never possible. So king e3, and I take here, and a pair of rooks come off, and he takes on d3, and I play rook a5. It's important to hold down the white rook so it has to guard the a pawn. The advantage for white is that his king is much more active than black's king. The advantage for black is that this rook is much more active than this rook. The rook is tying down the white rook to the protection of the a3 pawn. And also it surveys the 4th rank quite nicely, so it can influence both sides of the board. So also white's pawns are, well, they're not as healthy as black's connected pawns. In fact, these pawns are somewhat limiting his the scope of white's pieces. So I've achieved what I feel is a very, very holdable even rook ending. My opponent played king d4, which is kind of a waste of time. You should probably just go to e4 right away. I played h5 because I want to exchange these pawns in order to create a target which his king must defend. So I played king e4, and then takes, rook g5, hitting this pawn. So he has to play king f4 to defend it, and then rook c5. So tying down the rook to the c pawn. Here my opponent, trying to make something out of the position, played g5. Again, if I'm not attentive, he might be able to sneak his king around the pawn, but instead I played g6. So this gives me a square which I can check him on and force him to guard his pawn. He played a4, and this allows black to actually win a pawn by checking and then attacking a4. However, this is not too good. And I didn't even consider this because it gives white so much play here. Actually, Houdini feels that this is totally equal after white just after black just pulls his rook to a2 and gets behind this pawn, and then starts advancing his own pawns. But still, I wanted no part of this. I simply checked him on f5, which again forces him to go back to g4, and I played rook c5. So here, because his rook can never really do anything, it has to keep protecting this pawn. So he brought his king back to f4, I played rook f5 check, and I offered a draw, which he accepted. So, yeah, black does have a positional advantage here, and maybe I think I was asked a couple times, if I could have played for a win, and I don't think so. My philosophy with these positions is that even if you have a whole bunch of positional pluses in your favor. Trying to play for a win in an even material rook endgame always involves a lot of risk. And you know, my team was not going to win this match anyway. And I already have a position where white is not able to do anything, so I can force a draw against a player rated 400 points higher than me. So, I mean, objectively looking at the position, is maybe possible to, instead of rook f5, play something like b6 with the idea of getting the king to c6, and then launching some kind of a winning attempt with b5. But that would be the only possible plan to try and win this position. And if I do too much of that, then white can try and sacrifice his c pawn and get over here and attack from the side. And again, it's these rook endgames are very very difficult to calculate when especially when you have this kind of an imbalance, one side with a superior king, one side with a superior rook. So I decided to play it safe in this position and take the draw. So yeah, this was my last round game against Erik Santarius in the United States Amateur Team North event. And I hope that you got something from this analysis, and have a good day.